is Rachel Chalmers. I run the infrastructure practice at 451 Research. And it's my privilege to have worked with several of these gentlemen. This may be my favorite panel I've ever moderated. Out of 4 of my guests have PhDs in physics. I will let my panelists introduce themselves.
Okay. Which way?
Either Michael.
Go ahead.
I'm Michael Hoch, and I work at Virtustream. We're a cloud computing provider. We have our own infrastructure as a service platform, and we also have our own management and brokering layer that we've built, the Extreme software. I run the consulting business at Virtustream, which helps companies with their cloud and virtualization practice. We do strategy, we do implementation work, we do roadmaps. So unlike these other guys, I'm going to be talking a lot from the legacy enterprise background.
Dima Rekesh, IBM. I work in the Global Technology Services division of the company, also working on the cloud, and so basically it's consulting. So I know a little bit about the legacy situations as well.
Yeah, hi, good afternoon. Guido, Schroeder, SVP Products at Splunk. Splunk has a platform for machine data analytics, and our customers use us to derive from that what we call operational intelligence. So machine data is really all the data that is generated in very large amounts by everything in your IT infrastructure, your application servers, your telecom infrastructure, your mobile devices, your security devices, and so on and so forth. And we have made it very scalable to actually analyze this data and get insight out of it. Customers use us to get real-time visibility into what their IT systems are doing. They get also real-time visibility regards security aspects of their IT infrastructure, customer experience, and we recently see also quite a bit of use cases that go beyond IT, more into the area of industrial data that is really produced by the Internet of Things that is out there. And I think that's also a pretty interesting area to talk about.
Hi, my name is Michael Zeller. I'm the CEO of Zementis. We focus on predictive analytics, more specifically on the operational deployment, the integration, the execution of predictive models. We do that at the intersection of cloud computing and big data. And if you think about big data, it only becomes valuable when you derive decisions out of it, smarter insights. And that's what we enable using open standards, a very platform-independent and vendor-neutral approach to deploy predictive analytics, to do recommendations, risk scoring, anything that really drives your better decisioning processes in your business today, but based on data. So data is at the core of that value proposition.
So our topic today is advanced topics in cloud and applications you didn't realize the cloud could do yet. So let's pick up where the stack guys left off. What are some applications you've seen your customers running that really surprised or delighted or startled you?
I'm happy to take one.
I thought you might.
So, I mean, we definitely get every day some surprises. And, it's not necessarily about, let's say, complexity, whether it's in computation or scale. I mean, those are certainly also wow factors that we are seeing. If we look at companies like Apple and Facebook, LinkedIn, Zynga, you name it, it's certainly the size at which they're operating that is stunning. But apart from that, what I would say creates a lot of fun in my life every day is when you see things that customers are doing that you really haven't thought about. And let me give you one example for that. So just 2 or 3 weeks ago, we had a customer from Japan visiting us, an analyst. It's a company that actually has a large portfolio of real estate assets. They have about 100,000 elevators running in those real estate assets. And what they figured out is if they can tap into the data that is generated by these elevators and correlate that also with information that comes out of their building access systems, they actually get a very interesting forward-looking indicator of the economic health of a building. So you see which people are coming in and out into the building, and just counting it, what is the traffic, for example, in a suite, in a building gives them a clue, whether that lease will be renewed or not. So we had that analyst there to work through that data, and I think that's one of the unexpected examples I see happening, how people are using cloud and Internet of Things and also our capabilities to actually do something very new and innovative, and we have a ton of those.
Yep, yeah.
Yeah, similar for us. Internet of Things is one driver for big data, and social networks as well as people data in all sorts of shapes and forms. So we've seen very interesting applications really coming out of the mid-sized companies that are now embracing scoring services, for example, running thousands of complex statistical models against their data, or providing those services even to their clients. Things that they could not have done wouldn't it be for the cloud, because now they can launch very cost competitive, very dynamic, based on their business needs, actually, those services. And 2 years or 5 years ago, without that kind of economics, you just couldn't do it. So we see from the predictive analytics side a lot of new use cases coming up simply because of the cost coming down in big data and in cloud computing.
And I think that's kind of cute when it's used for ad targeting. I think it's unbelievably compelling when it starts to be used for things like personalized genomics and bioinformatics.
Absolutely.
Dima, what's happening in IBM land?
Well, it's such a broad question. I guess to your earlier point of sort of, on the unexpected and, the kind of things you may not necessarily think about. Just this morning I was talking to a gentleman, one of our customers. They are a company that is, subject to regulatory, to regulation and so forth. And every quarter they run certain reports that need to be completed in a certain period of time. So they spin up, several hundred virtual machines in the IBM cloud, and they perform their computation. So for them, it is important that the computation is bounded in time. So the performance of each individual virtual machine is important. And so basically, that's the kind of thing that oftentimes you don't think about. People talk about Hadoop and so forth, and it's sort of like a batch job. You can, start it and run it, and it doesn't really matter when it completes. But you start seeing applications where the velocity of data is really important, the time to completion is important, and then it basically permeates all layers of the cloud, because, right, you need to get the data into the cloud, you need to crunch it, and then you need to evacuate all the outputs as well. That's just one of the examples.
Yep. And then, Michael, your customers are doing stuff that they could never have afforded to do before, but they tend to be doing really traditional IT stuff. It's just that they're doing it in new ways now.
Right, and that's where, when I think about what's new and exciting, I think it's new and exciting on how we can do it today and the scale we can do it today, but the actual applications are not necessarily that new and exciting. For example, there's one of our customers is a large retail, global top 3 retailer company who's trying to figure out, they've for years known the possibility of being able to analyze point-of-sale data, even within a month, much less within 3 months or within a day. The fact that we have a virtualized environment, we've got now strategies using SAP HANA and other new technologies that are coming out, is actually allowing them to get closer to the point where they could have somewhat real-time information. And for them, somewhat real-time is, as opposed to 15 days after the end of the month, being able to say within 15 minutes of the end of the month what you did in sales last month by store, by retail, by channel.
It gives you a lot more options about what to do. And then a customer of Virtustream's that I really love is Diesel Direct. Tiny little company doing very straightforward IT, but using it to do really interesting things. Do you want to talk about that?
Well, Diesel Direct's actually not one of my customers. You probably know more about them than I do.
They refuel trucks when they're parked, and so what they've ended up doing is keeping track of customers' fleets for them and the fluid levels. And they're turning themselves into an information company from being a truck refueling company. And the cloud is integral to them being able to make that shift. Yeah,
so another company's similar idea is we work with a company that does pallet manufacturing and tracking. They manufacture them, they ship them out. It's almost a lease model instead of a buy model, so they want to know where all those pallets are. Using the cloud and using the analytics from the cloud, they're able to greatly increase the velocity of that turnaround, which decreases their inventory, increases their profit margins.
And once again, we're back in the Internet of Things. I think it's no coincidence that the three of you that do have doctorates in physics are all working on big data and analytics professionally. Can we talk about how these new technologies have arisen as a response to the opportunities created by the cloud, and how much more important they're going to be when we really do start to see ubiquitous, intelligent things.
Yeah, absolutely. I think looking at the capabilities, so cost is one side, but looking at the capabilities to experiment, the capabilities of being able to really crunch large volumes of data that come out of sensor signals for the smart energy grid, for example, are extremely important for us to be more efficient in the future. So we have a lot of power savings to do, and that is just one opportunity. I think overall we see the agility for companies to take the big data and actually create valuable insight in a shorter amount of time is more important often than the actual cost reduction. So it is really capabilities, also experimentation. You wouldn't do things today a few years ago that you can do today because you couldn't put the infrastructure in place. Today you can experiment, fail fast, so to speak, and then pick the models, the processes that really worked for you and make a significant difference. So I think as big data becomes pervasive, the platforms become pervasive, we will see a new next logical step in business process optimization driven by that.
Yeah, happy to add a little bit to that. I think we are talking really now about combination of analytics and big data. And, first of all, I think one has to realize that analytics is super important, not only in the web, but pretty much everywhere in the industry. And the reason for that is, I think whatever you want to do and whatever you want to, let's say, improve in your company, you need to start asking questions, right? And analytics provides really the tools to answer those questions. So that is, I would say, one starting point I come from. And then as far as big data is concerned, I would say that there's first of all just the reality of things happening now on internet scale, and with that bringing really large amounts of data with it. Data that is created at a large velocity, that is created at a large volume, needs to be stored at large volume, and that often, especially in our world, has often also, I would say, a high degree of variability, which are these, if you are not familiar with that area, the 3 V's that are used in the industry now commonly to define what big data is. Yeah. I think this reality brings some challenges with it, but also some opportunities. We definitely see that customers that have a strategy in place and look into their data assets and develop a plan, have some successes with it because there is an enormous amount of value in their data, and a lot of companies are just starting to realize it. But I think whenever you are managing something at a very large scale, and there are plenty of companies out there now that do this, a small gain of a few percentage points in terms of attracting additional customers, or being a percentage point more efficient in how you are running actually a transaction means just a big number in terms of the outcome. And so there is a big benefit. The other comment I would make is wherever I'm going, I was actually yesterday and before yesterday in New York, and when you're in New York, you talk to banks, right? So we were talking to some banks there, and they certainly, meet those criteria of doing things at a large scale and large transaction volumes. And one of the things I'm definitely observing all over is that I think we are just at the beginning, right? Yeah. So many companies are just, tapping now into the tip of the iceberg and see what's out there, and now we are providing a little bit better instrumentarium to actually, manage and tame all this data. But I believe we are really just at the very, very beginning of this transition happening.
I think that's a really key point, and I see lots of people hand-waving about, big data is going to change the world. I think what a lot of companies are glossing over is the fact that to get a lot of value out of analytics, you need to be a crack Java programmer, a quantitative scientist, and a data scientist, and those skills are very rare and even more rarely found in combination. Dima, do you find that, or do you find that people are starting to develop tools that support analytics in ways that don't require you to have a brain the size of a planet?
That's an excellent question. Oh gosh, no, I mean, so, to be blunt about it, right, when, a lot of times when people think about big data, right, they would say, oh, Hadoop or something like that, right, and so, to use Hadoop, you don't really necessarily, need to have specialized training.
Unless you want good results.
Well, I mean, in the sense that it does, of course. I mean, if you're a Java programmer, you can use it. If you're, in a Shell programmer, or Perl programmer, or a Ruby programmer, you could use it. But then I would definitely do agree that with my distinguished colleagues here that if you want to derive some sense out of your data, right, then you would need to do a lot more and understand how to model the data and so forth. One thing I wanted to put forth to you guys is interesting, I guess, paradigm or a pattern that I have seen, and I wonder if my colleagues have seen it. When we talk about big data, right, we kind of oftentimes we say, oh well, for many years people would store all this stuff on tape or something, and then they would do nothing with it. Or they would store it in their hard drives, and then they would fill up those hard drives, and then they would eventually have to do something with that data, like dump it or something. And now the storage has gotten cheap. So, oftentimes, when I have seen that folks really, for not for all customers, but some, right? They really literally, kind of treat that data as low. Low output, kind of thing. In other words, it's kind of like garbage, right? Now you can go through all the trash cans and collect garbage and go through it and so forth. So if you derive some insight from it, great. If you don't, well, okay. The investment is low, and that in turn creates a set of different tooling, because say if you're in a bank, right, and you want to crunch all your data, you want to make sure that data is replicated and you don't lose any single byte. Right? Because that is very important to you, to your business, so on, right? So you make sure that everything is robust, it's, high availability and so forth. Whereas, if you deal with garbage, well, you might spill here and there, a bunch. And so, like, the Hadoop by default is triple replicated, so they don't need triple replication. And they'll lose some of this data. Maybe 90% of it survives, no big deal. And that permeates, starts from the architecture of their storage into the higher levels of their software architecture, basically optimized for some finite output. The job doesn't complete when all of the computation has completed. It completes when it's at 90%. Mm-hmm. Have you guys seen anything like that?
I think kind of top level down, we see more and more executive levels realizing that data is a valuable asset, and I think that's the paradigm shift. If nothing else, that the big data hype that you hear about it everywhere, like analytics, has driven into the heads of most executives these days. That now they start actually looking for data. What can we do with it? How can we store it? What do we have today? Just to have an initiative to figure out what are all the disparate data sources that we have already, and what can we do with them? That there are hidden, gems in their data. That there's value already to be derived from. I think that paradigm shift we've seen, but we're still very, very early. I agree. A lot of the tools are, there, but clunky, or you need specialists to operate them. But we see more and more high-level tools that can put that into the business line's hands, and I think that's where it needs to go eventually. You will always need, very, very mathematical scientists or data scientists, whatever the current term is, to analyze the data and drive certain models or discover certain patterns in the data. But essentially, you need to ask the business question first and say, what can I do with it, and where does it provide value? And the more we can drive up the decision capability into the executives' hands, I think the easier it will be to identify those opportunities.
I have a brief comment there, if I may.
Okay.
One of the tools I really like in Splunk is top versus rare. A lot of the time when you're using big data, you want to see, give me my top 10 worst performing systems, but sometimes you want to see the outlying result. I was talking to the CIO of United Health last week, and he said that his systems managed to find the rare viral illness that was causing a kid's condition just before she was scheduled to go into surgery for a kidney transplant. It turned out that she didn't need, so they put her on antibiotics instead, and she recovered. And that was because they were looking for the outliers. So sometimes you want to keep 90% of the data and you don't care about what you throw away. But sometimes you need to keep it all because you're looking for the very rare conjunctions. I think it really depends what vertical you're in.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, in the enterprise customers that I work with, I'm generally coming at it from the business side. I might be brought in by a CIO or a CTO, but it's really about how is the business using the data and how are they doing it efficiently. So when we're talking about big data with these customers and the intersection with analytics, it's how do you get the information to a point where you can actually interrogate it. But there also is a large segmentation between the common business reports, the standard reports, and then the exceptional data that you're actually going to use to interrogate from a business perspective. So a lot of the work that we've been doing with our customers is what are your business processes, who are the people who are using which types of data, where do you need to save 100% and where do you need to actually only save 10%. So the opportunity between cloud computing, big data analytics is a cost savings around the common reports that need to be used by everybody in a 70,000 person company, and then the actual interrogators, the chief analysts and so on, that need a certain amount of data in a very small place. And everybody doesn't need everything, is what we end up helping them to determine.
What's that great line about Pearl? Common things should be easy and impossible things should be possible.
And maybe adding to that, the reporting layer of it, I think as we're collecting more and more data, I think sometimes I say the last thing we need is more reports. We really need more automation. So the right reports, the right strategic information that a human needs in order to make a certain decision. But then there's probably overwhelming amount of data that can be used for automate decisions. And that's where more intelligent algorithms can plug into the data, detect the patterns and alert someone, for example, if it's really necessary. Otherwise, to automate the cases that are mainstream, that fit your risk profile, make the recommendations, all the things that we think smarter systems do for us today. And I think that's why I think IBM's Smarter Planet marketing is just phenomenal. It's just very, I think, easygoing in terms of we know, we feel good, we see what's smart. It does help us in everyday life. You don't necessarily have to understand all the details, down to the deepest level of math or physics. But I think that's going to drive quite a bit of other opportunities for us as we automate more and more.
The marketing's fabulous. How's the execution?
Well, we have to ask our IBM fellow here.
Oh, well, so no, I mean obviously the Smarter Planet incorporates a couple of pretty at least several pretty interesting accounts. So we work with cities and governments and so forth to provide intelligence and so on. But coming back to our big data and cloud discussion, I just wanted to comment on one thing that I find interesting, and that is that in fact sometimes cloud through the virtue of its elasticity can complement the big data analyses. In other words, if you perform a sophisticated workflow of some kind that involves computation, right? You need to essentially schedule your jobs on resources that do not yet exist, right? So you kind of know that at different steps in your workflow, you might require more or less of that hardware, as it were, right? And so the most exciting applications that I have seen are highly elastic. They would require maybe, let's imagine, one or two machines when the data is actually floating in, is coming in, right? Once the transfers have completed, provisions a server farm, does some computation and moves the data, shuffles it, and so forth. And I think that's where, we go from purely the big data discussion, right? Because you could say, well, it's a black box to me. Why do I care? The cloud it's invisible. But actually, without the cloud, you couldn't accomplish something like that and meet your whether this is financial goals or in fact be able to complete the job.
I'm going to throw one more question at the panel myself, and then we'll open for audience questions. So get your questions queued up for our rocket scientists. The question that always comes up is security in the cloud, and I want to ask it in two ways. What are the most advanced measures that you've seen in place to secure data that's stored in the cloud? And what are some of the best security applications you see coming out of the cloud? I've seen lots of cloud applications that are starting to track fraud and waste in enterprises that I think is a very, very interesting approach. Can you talk about those two aspects, security for the cloud and security from the cloud?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. I mean, I don't want to turn this too much into marketing, but Splunk is actually used a lot also for security use cases. Yeah, we're actually showing up in the enterprise security quadrant of one analyst company with some other companies that are very specialized on that.
Yeah, your competitors are very keen to describe you as just a security information manager.
It's one of many use cases we are doing. I mean, apart from the tooling, I would say, first of all, I think we realized, and we have some colleagues in the company that know a lot more about this than I do, but I think we realized that if you want to, stay ahead in security, you need to think yourself like a criminal. So that is maybe the tagline, yeah, and it really means, to put yourself into a potential attacker and think about, what are the areas of vulnerabilities? What are, the let's say standard procedures in enterprise security that the defenders are running? Yeah. So that is really one thing, and we don't believe. I mean, this is really leading then to what our philosophy is to deal with the topic. We don't think that you can deal with security threats, and many of those are unknown. Yeah, there are known security threats, there are unknown security threats. And we believe that you can't deal with the unknown security threats with a completely static tool set, yeah, and running just a set of defined rules that were put in place at some point in time, and you continuously just use this set of rules that you have defined at some point in time, because it's very dynamic, it's moving all the time, and the way how we try to approach it is really from a more statistical approach. Statistics help us to define what is a normal state, and at whatever you are looking. And there's one other aspect that is important for us and that we are seeing, is that pretty much every information in every piece of data in your IT infrastructure is security relevant. Yeah, and you can't throw anything away. So it's what's happening in your network. Yeah, I mean, if things are all of a sudden getting slow, yeah, there might be a reason for that. Yeah, what's happening with your applications? Also what is happening out there in terms of devices that are accessing your network. Again, our approach to it is think like a criminal, apply statistics to define what the normal is, and then have mechanisms in place that would alert you if something is getting actually out of those bounds. And then, start the forensics. We have a very flexible toolkit that actually allows you then, if something looks fishy, to drill a little bit deeper into the data and figure out what's actually going on. Yeah? And then, kind of learn from that and put iteratively new rules and things in place. So, I mean, we believe that you need to continuously learn and evolve with how the threats are evolving in your environment as well.
Yeah, I would totally agree with my colleague. And that, at IBM we have obviously multiple initiatives related to security, and one of them is of course statistical in nature, because nowadays you have some organizations or even governments who are extremely sophisticated, and so they would, to put it bluntly, right, they would hack into your machine or illegally acquire it, and your virtual machine in your cloud, and set up their stuff there and prepare an attack of some sort, right? So, again, highly sophisticated, so, simple tools will not detect it. And the only way to basically deal with something like that is to have some software that proactively monitors the environment and looks for strange signals, essentially, right? So, I mean, that's one way to deal with it, and definitely this is a difficult situation, because you kind of cross the line between what's available to your client as part of the contract, right, as an infrastructure provider. I mean, that's of course, looking at it from an infrastructure standpoint. The other couple of things that probably should be mentioned in the context of security is a compliance. A lot of times, right, when an organization wants to implement their cloud, they want to ensure that compliance is enforced. And so we have also automated solutions that help them with that.
I am contractually obligated to say that a compliant machine is not necessarily secure and a secure machine is not necessarily compliant. People should be made aware of that.
Yes, right. And then, of course, there's the concept of trusted computing that basically starts with the metal and permeates all the way to images and the executables that run on your machine.
From our perspective, I always see it from the customer side. That the first question I get asked is my data, is my model, is my application secure in the cloud? And I think from what I've seen in in-house data centers, it can be as secure and more secure easily, more than you probably take care of it internally.
Yeah, the cloud providers do this a lot. No, our stuff is way more secure than what you've got on-prem. The customers tend not to like having that pointed out.
Yes, so it's an ongoing discussion. I think it's about education. It's about just taking the necessary steps in order to secure it. For vendors, just secure your applications. Best practices that everybody would do. Secured certificates, logins, and all the credentials. I mean, I think the cloud gives you all the tools. It's just a matter of using them.
It's probably easier to make that argument at your end of the market, isn't it? Because small companies such as Virtustream does a lot of work with, they don't pride themselves on being able to secure their IT infrastructure in-house.
Do you mean the customers that we work with?
Yeah.
Well, we work with large and small customers, and what I find is that they don't necessarily know what they want from security from a cloud provider. They just know that it's a concern and we need to address it. So our job one is usually, well, what is your security parameters for the cloud, for this application, for this data set? And we need to help them define both the compliance side and the security side. Often they're coming to us primarily with the compliance requirement. I need to meet HIPAA, I need to be PCI, I need to be FISMA, moderate, whatever it is, and they don't necessarily take the next level of dive of what does that mean in a security implementation. So we're providing them with security frameworks and providing them with really helping them understand their own specs before we can say whether we meet them or not.
Yeah. Okay, I think we've got some time for some audience questions. Hi. Do we have some?
Hi, Chris Rigatuso from Skyfall Consulting Group. My question is related to big data. Obviously, statistics has matured over decades without access to big data, right? Experimental design, samples, distributions, all that stuff. In a world where the goal is to make a decision without the population of actual data, right? So, and now with the high velocity data, lots of web scale sources, you have the population of data that you need. So the question is, how much statistical methodology do we not need as more and more things become measured by big data and we can do aggregations and measurements with what we have? Looking for a short answer here.
I think it makes your life easier. You can, I guess, be a little more quick and dirty, and time to market is important for business. So as in the past you may have been digging into real complex theoretical models, today often big data trumps the more refined model, and that's what we see very often. And if you have seen the Netflix prize, at the end of the day there was basically two teams that combined all of their models, and you have model ensembles of hundreds of models that you average some way for the right output, and they perform better than each individual model, even as much work as they have put into that particular model. So maybe that's an indication that data is going to help us be a little bit more lazy on the algorithm side.
Yeah, if I can, I actually see the opposite issue, which is that now that data is out there and executives know that it's out there, they want it, but they can't get to it. Because there's so much data, it can't actually get to the same place. So they're trying to figure out how can they distribute the processing and actually do the processing out where it's done, bring back the relevant answers to the next layer, aggregation, so that you end up with a data set that is manageable in a timely fashion, as opposed to trying to bring all that data together and have it in one place so you could just on the fly query it.
I mean, I would just like to add one word of caution that people have the right mental model about what happens with data. I don't think it's always really a static set of data, a large static set of data on which you run an algorithm. what is for us more important, and we see customers doing a lot, is that they have a very small time window of opportunity to react actually and act on real-time data. And that is typically a rather smaller set of data where, you know, it still makes a lot of sense to apply statistical methods to understand what's going on there in real time.
Yeah, and just one quick thing to add to that, an obvious, you know, trivial comment is that in today's world, you know, the world doesn't end after one game, basically, right? So, you know, once you realize your data set is deficient in some way, you improve your data collection. So for the next round, you're prepared better, and that reduces the need to perform sophisticated computations.
I don't think we're ready to discard Bayesian math yet. I think there's still plenty of unknown out there. More audience questions? Hi, down the front.
Just, what do each of you see as sort of the threshold of big data?
It depends.
Volume of data or the volume of data plus the complexity of data?
Yeah.
It's a moving target, I assume. Yeah, in 10 years from now, this you know, what might be considered just as toying, what we are doing right now. So I mean, I had recently a flashback, thinking about something I was doing 20 years ago. I was actually, you know, trying to monitor machine data generated in a manufacturing process. And at that time, we had a 250 megabyte hard disk and a 486 25 megahertz processor. And that was big data at the time. Yeah, and I think it will just continue like that. And a lot of people, to be honest, I hear, don't like that term at all. Yeah, they think it's very confusing and it's maybe just a convention and slang in the moment. But it doesn't seem to be a very well-defined term in every place.
Our customers define it based on where they sit. Because if I'm an analyst out in Germany, I'm going to have one conception of what big is, and if I'm the chief marketing officer back in New York, you're going to have a completely different perception of what big. They're constantly struggling with that exact definition within the companies.
Yeah, I would throw out kind of like a geek's, I guess, perspective, or a programmer, right? As somebody who's programmed in Java and C and so on, right, and familiar with conventional tools like FTP and HTTP and stuff. You know, I'd say to you that I was working on one assignment. It was a bioinformatics company, and they gave us a terabyte data set, and I suddenly realized that it's not, you know, consisting of hundreds of thousands of files. I think something like close to 1 million. And so I had to FTP it from wherever it was over to somewhere else, and I realized that I couldn't do it with FTP. I just couldn't. There was just no way. Yeah. And so I realized, wow, so FTP that served me, you know, well for many, many years suddenly is not useful. So my trusted tool that I like so much and trust is no longer sufficient. And then I, you know, also was trying to analyze some subsets of it on my computer, right? And I realized that there's just no way I can do it either. There's no memory, and you know, I could not chunk the data. I mean, the problem into manageable chunk and so forth. So I'd say to you that big data is a class of problems which will remind you that not one but several of the tools of your trade will start to fail you, and that's probably where it probably is empirically
one of the
defined.
better definitions I've ever heard.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Yeah. It's where you kind of get to the boundary of what you can do with your existing tools, and you have to stretch. I think that's maybe the easiest definition. And I know I was on another panel recently, and we decided up front we're not going to discuss the definition of big data because we would waste too much time of the panel in order to get there. We wanted to talk about the problems and the applications, but I think the stretching of the tools and where you are today versus what you can do is probably the best moving target. It's another easy one.
Thank you very much to each of my panelists. This has been just as high-poweredly intellectual as I hoped it would be. Thank you very much for the audience questions, and I will no longer stand between you and your break.
Thank you.
Yes,